Welcome to the TomorrowZone Catalyst Podcast, where we explore cutting-edge innovation and the future of business. Today, our guest is Jill Molitor. She is a powerhouse in the world of equipment finance and fraud prevention. With over 2 decades at Stearns Bank, Jill has built deep expertise across credit, fraud, strategy, compliance, and risk management. She now serves as Director of Credit and Fraud Administration, and she's leading efforts to strengthen fraud prevention, improve internal controls, and drive a credit-strong culture. And we're going to dive into what that means in a moment. Beyond her work at the bank, Jill is a certified fraud examiner and a certified lease and finance professional, something we have in common. She serves on multiple advisory boards and is passionate about financial literacy and fraud prevention in her community. Jill, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Deb. I am very honored to have been given the invite to join. So I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it. I've so enjoyed collaborating with you on the CLFP Foundation board. And also, just fun fact, the only time I have ever escaped an escape room is because you were on my team. So
my sleuthing skills paid off.
Yes, you kind of blew me away with your problem-solving skills. So before we dive into all of that is fraud prevention, I wanted to just have you share a little bit about your story, your background. What are a couple of the highlights that led you to the work that you're doing today? And how did you get interested in this line of work?
Oh, wow. That is a loaded question. So maybe I'll just start with kind of what got me interested in the type of work. And that's going to lead me to touch on some of my highlights.
Cool.
And just going way back, one of my unsung heroes was my maternal grandfather, and he lived and breathed a life of integrity, and he really showed true empathy to others. He dedicated his entire retired life to helping others with gestures that included bringing candy to the elderly at nursing homes, playing the concertina for them, and he would make these just beautiful and elaborate projects out of woodwork, and then he'd give them to people just out of the goodness of his heart. And right before I went to college, I can remember him sitting in his rocking chair, and he's rocking back and forth, and he looked at me with tears in his eyes, and he said, "Jill, I'm going to tell you the same thing that I told your mother when she went to college, and that's that you know right from wrong, and you know what to do." And I always knew, okay, I don't want to disappoint him, and I want to continue that life of integrity and empathy, and I wanted to carry on his legacy. So from there, he had operated his own business for many years. And his entire adult life, he banked at a small community bank in southern Minnesota. And he said, "Jill, why don't you apply there and just see if they'll take you under their wing?" And so they took a chance on me, hired me to work as a teller in the summers while I was in college. And then kind of towards the end of my college career, I had met my now husband and wanted to move up into central Minnesota. So my now sister-in-law worked for Stearns Bank at the time, and she said, "You should really apply with Stearns Bank." So I did, and they took a chance on me. And 3 days after I got hired, Norm Skalicki, who was our CEO at the time, came and he shook my hand and he welcomed me to the Stearns family. And from there, I just knew that I was in the right place. So fast forward 25 years, and I've really focused on just learning as much about the equipment finance division as I could. Last 5 years, I've really focused on understanding bank site underwriting and how fraud fits into all of that. And now I am really in a position where I think that we need to continue to educate outwards and explain to internal team members and our communities, how do you have a credit strong mindset and how do you reduce the potential to fall victim to fraud?
Wow. You know, I love the inspiration in your story. And often it's just such a fine thread that connects us to where we are today. Thank you so much for sharing your story. So I know that you're really passionate about educating people on fraud and fraud prevention. And, you know, we live in such a rapidly changing world and fraud tactics are constantly evolving, especially with the rapid pace of technology evolution. What emerging fraud risks should leaders in equipment finance be paying attention to these days?
Oh boy, I think we only have half hour, so I'm going to try and condense this. So some of the most common that I see, particularly in equipment finance, are altered documentation. So like bank statements, tax returns, photo IDs, identity theft, synthetic identity theft. They continue to pop their heads up. But synthetic identity theft has really just evolved over the last several years. I don't see that stopping, unfortunately, but there's ways that we can position ourselves to really help mitigate that potential risk. In that synthetic area, a lot of dealerships or businesses are two common types of that type of
So
identity
for our
theft.
listeners, Jill, who don't know what synthetic identity theft means, can you kind of give like a nutshell
Oh, absolutely.
definition?
I describe it. It's almost like a Frankenstein identity where somebody will take pieces of either partially made up or fully made up information. And sometimes it is true information. So they might grab a Secretary of State filing of a company that was inactive. They'll reactivate it. They'll maybe bring in a victim, maybe a victim whose identity they have stolen and make it look like that person is the owner. They might change the business name just slightly. They might change the address. So they're really trying to create an identity, and because they've created it, it makes it much easier for them to carry out the fraud. One thing that I have seen is, as far as the person that is synthetically created, the fraudsters will sometimes grab the social security number of a minor, because what does a minor do? They don't have any credit built up, and it's going to be a lot of years before they're going to establish credit. And so they can go for years and years using their social security number before anybody finds out. So then what they'll do is they'll put these pieces together, create the synthetic identity, and then they'll go out and they'll apply for credit, knowing full well that they're going to get denied. But what are they doing? They're creating a profile. Now somebody has a business name, an address, a person tied to it, and they're just creating that profile. And they might do that a couple more times, apply and get denied. And then eventually they'll maybe latch on, or they'll find somebody that says, oh, I'll take a risk on you. And they'll maybe apply for a business credit card or a really small loan. They'll pay on it for a while, and then they'll just start building that. And eventually they're going to start financing larger pieces of equipment. And then they'll pay for a while. Eventually they're going to bust out, and you will never hear from them again. And it's really hard because they have created that identity to trace them.
Yeah. Wow. Are there any other emerging fraud risks that we should be paying attention to? You mentioned altered documents, synthetic identity.
Yep, business email compromise. That one it's not emerging, but it's out there. It's a problem.
That seems to be happening faster too.
And it happens a lot in businesses where really watch your emails that are coming in. Would your CEO or CFO really ask you, hey, this is urgent, I need you to wire funds? Well, does that make sense? So doing the common sense check is really important. And artificial intelligence is really evolving, where fraudsters are using voice spoofing, deepfake technology to impersonate customers or staff. Wire fraud, where somebody might be sitting in somebody's email box and then waiting for that right moment to slip in fraudulent wire instructions. So not an all-encompassing list, but it does really cover a lot of the schemes that seem to pop up in equipment finance space.
Yeah, and it definitely makes the case for educating yourself and being aware. So you mentioned AI, and that's something that comes up just about every episode on our show. It comes up every day in our work. So AI and automation are playing such a big role in business today, but they're also playing a big role in fraud detection. How do you see technology shaping the future of fraud prevention from your perspective?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. One would be utilizing AI for biometric verification. So that's going to check to make sure that identity documents, video submissions are authentic. They can be programmed to detect unusual patterns. There's machine learning models, and those can use algorithms that will analyze data sets And from those data sets, they can create models that provide the ability to predict outcomes and classify information. And that can help banks to potentially really flag suspicious transactions or behaviors. There's generative AI tools, and those can produce content that responds to user prompts, and they can help produce text or create visuals and sort through data to improve efficiencies and accuracy while you're doing investigations. So like this podcast could be an example, right? Where after we are done with the podcast, the AI could bring up certain languages or certain texts so that we can easily summarize the conversation. And actually, Deb, you were the
exactly
first one that told me that, and it was I received a summary of our conversation within like minutes, and I'm looking at it going, wow, that was really cool. So it can really help improve that efficiency and accuracy. So both those machine learning and the AI, the generative AI, they can reduce your operating costs. They can improve risk management strategies. One of the concerns or one of the challenges of adopting that into a financial institution is that we have to take into consideration data privacy requirements. And is there bias in the algorithms? Is that going to violate any fair lending regulations that we're required to adhere to? Making sure that the tools meet those regulatory requirements and that we maintain that customer trust. So they are really great tools when used in the right way, and we need to make sure that we're using them correctly.
Yeah, I think that's true of just about any general purpose tool. Use it for good, not for evil. So you've built your career on fostering a credit strong culture. First of all, how do you define credit strong? And what leadership principles do you believe are essential for building that credit strong culture?
Yeah, sure. So that credit strong culture really starts with a well-defined loan policy. And then you have to make sure your team members are going to follow that policy. So it's one thing to write it down. It's another thing to write it down and make sure that do people understand it? Can they follow it? Does this make sense? And when you're writing it, taking into consideration the size and the strength and the expertise, the types of lending that you offer, prior experiences, because if you have a loan policy and you look at it and say, is there anything we need to change? Well, take your prior experiences into consideration. And then lastly, really looking at the borrowing needs of that target customer base. So then you've got your loan policy, and that is going to be complemented by a well-defined, very intentional, and often revisited strategic plan. And that strategic plan, that's going to be really fluid. So what you say you want to do and strive to do and what your goals and ambitions are, year one, might evolve. They might change going forward, but having that goal in mind is very important. And then you need to hold your team members accountable to adhere to both that loan policy and strategic plan. So they should really articulate the vision, the mission, the values. Make sure that you have frequent and consistent collaboration between your leaders and team members, and make sure that those team members have the opportunity to learn and to hone their skill sets, either by doing formal on-the-job training and gaining experience, taking on special assignments, or maybe you send them to a specialized type of training course, but really fostering that growth and making sure that they have the opportunity to learn and be a part of carrying out that vision is so important. And here at Stearns, it's really common for leaders and team members to work hand in hand daily. We'll bring in applicable parties to make sure that we come to the best conclusion. Nobody is ever off in a silo. We really want to make sure we're working together, and leadership from executive to senior to everyday managers, everybody is available and everybody is readily available so that we can expose team members to a variety of situations and conversations. And so to me, it's like you might have a title, right? But that title really just what tells us what kind of experience might that person have, and gives you an avenue for this might be who I need to tap on for the situation that I'm looking at right now. And that really helps create a culture where team members feel comfortable. They're encouraged to bring forward their questions, their ideas, their concerns. And we love to celebrate wins together.
Oh, that's
And
so
we
cool.
really, we couldn't carry it out without our amazing team members. They will roll up their sleeves and they will dive into whatever the day brings them.
That sounds like such a cool culture. And one of the things that really stood out to me is, the clarity of not only the loan policy, but the strategic plan, but then also creating that culture of collaboration is really important. And it sounds like your team just kind of has in their DNA asking the question, who else needs to be involved in this?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. It is really, really fun.
That is really cool. So what are some ways you celebrate wins?
Oh boy, we'll just do a cheer sometimes. Sometimes you take a couple of moments and just do a celebration with each other. A couple times a year we get together and we really talk about those wins. We have strategic team building exercises. So we really just love to take a second to shout out.
That's so cool. It sounds like you really are intentionally investing in creating that credit strong culture.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So let's kind of get back to fraud prevention. It's not just a bank issue. It's really a business issue. So what are some steps that businesses can take to protect themselves from the fraud risks that you were talking about?
Sure. So I really wish we had like another hour to talk about this because I could go on and on, but I'll just kind of summarize a couple of high points here. One of the largest pieces of advice in general that I'd give is to take the opportunity to learn from reactive situations, either ones that your institution has experienced or that you have heard that others have experienced. So read through articles. Networking through your organizations is a great way to learn some of those reactive situations. And that's going to help you be proactive in the future and recognize situations before losses occur. So an example of that would be that if you find yourself the victim of identity theft, really dig into the case, find the root cause, determine what procedures you can put in place to help prevent that from happening again should a similar situation arise. And then just educate. Did I say educate? Because your team needs to understand, and possibly even the community, depending on what the situation was, what do they need to look for? How can they help themselves not become a victim? And I look at it as, so it's great for your fraud investigators to understand the fraud schemes, but it can't stop with them. It doesn't do us any good if they just hold that to their hearts. It's really up to the fraud investigators to truly do their job, present examples, use those examples to train frontline staff or anybody else who might come across those situations so that they understand. And that would be my largest piece of advice.
Yeah, you really emphasized education, and actually the way that you're talking about the way that fraud investigators are doing this reminds me of something that we practice in our world of innovation and digital transformation. And that's, we have a regular practice of retrospectives where we take a look at, okay, what happened? What worked well? What could have been better? And what do we need to think about for next time? And we actively do this, and we actively track each time we come together to do this. So we do it after everything, every project, every event, so we've got not only a library of these learnings, but we actively roll the learning into the next thing we're doing. And it sounds like that's actually a practice as a fraud investigator. It's a continuous, never-ending learning process.
Yeah, it's one thing to investigate the case and we always say to report the dots and then to connect the dots, but it's quite another to make sure that we share some of that education and say that these are things that you need to look for next time. These are things that we need to be really intentional to pay attention to so that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and it's not about placing blame or pointing fingers, but like success comes from learning from those instances. But then the other thing that was really interesting to me is you mentioned the educating and looking at cases can help you to proactively identify. So you can start to see the signs, kind of like the red car scenario, pay attention to red cars and suddenly you see them everywhere when you're driving around.
You can almost develop that skeptical mind can make you overly skeptical sometimes. So you do have to be careful. You have to be careful that you're not placing unintentional or creating unintentional bias, and really making sure that when you're looking at situations that you are looking at them from a neutral lens.
So I want to just kind of double click on the education theme a little bit. You've earned multiple certifications in your career and recently completed a leadership academy, you mentioned, and you're really involved in the CLFP Foundation. And I get the pleasure of collaborating with you on those things. What drives your passion for education? Because it comes up every conversation that we have.
Yes, it does. No, I'm a lifelong learner. My husband calls me a sleuth. I like to understand basic concepts. I've always had a passion to understand a little bit about a lot of topics, and then trying to figure out how do I really incorporate that knowledge to foster growth in my professional and personal life. And so that has really just led me to meet and be able to converse with a lot of like-minded people with diverse industry, educational backgrounds, cultures, experiences. And then you can embrace those and really bring those to new and to improve existing practices. And I look at how can I use that within Stearns and within my community. So by studying for those various certifications, and then I serve on 2 professional and 1 community board that really helps expand the collaboration with those like-minded people. And I can simultaneously, while I'm sleuthing and bringing in and absorbing information, I can use that and educate people outwards.
Oh, I love it. So we ask every guest on our show our signature question. I've learned so much from so many different leaders over the years. So I wanted to ask you, Jill, what's one thing that leaders can do today to shape a more awesome future?
Well, I firmly believe that our role as leaders, both professionally and in our personal lives, is to share knowledge with others and to lead by example, with intention, with integrity, and with empathy. And I often go back to the quote by Maya Angelou, where she said, "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel." So share your experiences, hold people accountable, do the right thing when no one is looking, but always remember to do that while making them know that you genuinely care about them.
Wow. And I can just see in your story, Jill, how you are living out that integrity that you saw in your grandfather so long ago.
Yep. I think of him every day. And I actually found an article just over the weekend. My son was digging through some things and we found an article of him where he was named an unsung hero in his local community shortly before he passed away. And I was like,
oh my gosh,
what are the chances that I found that right now?
That is so cool.
Yeah, he's still watching.
That is awesome. Jill, this has been a really awesome conversation. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing your insights. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with your network. And until next time, stay curious and choose to make awesome happen.